Casper, Wyoming had never been a city of great opportunities. With a population of just over 50,000, it lived a quiet life of oil workers, ranchers, and small business owners. Everyone knew everyone else, and gossip spread faster than the morning news on the local radio. Samantha Reed understood this peculiarity of the town perfectly when she moved here from Denver 5 years ago. She was 24 at the time, had just dropped out of college in her junior year, and was looking for a place to start a new life. Casper seemed like the perfect choice, big enough to blend in, but small enough to quickly get to know all the potentially interesting men. Samantha had been working as a waitress at the Golden Horseshoe restaurant on Main Street for 3 years. The place was popular with the local elite, business owners, lawyers, doctors. It was here that she met most of her sponsors, as she called them to herself. "Sam, table 7 wants more coffee." Mary, an elderly waitress who had been working at the restaurant for 20 years, called out to her. Samantha glanced at table 7 and smiled. Richard Coleman had been sitting there for half an hour, glancing at her from time to time over his financial newspaper. A large man of 45, with graying hair and attentive brown eyes, he owned the most successful car dealership in town. 6 months ago, Richard had divorced his wife after 20 years of marriage, and since then, he had been a regular at the restaurant. "Of course, Richard," Samantha said, approaching his table with a coffee pot. She knew that using his first name created a sense of closeness. "How's the car dealership?" "Not bad," he replied without taking his eyes off her face. "How are you? Still dreaming of finishing your studies?" Samantha often told customers the story of how she had been forced to interrupt her education due to financial difficulties. It evoked sympathy and a desire to help. "I dream about it, but I don't see how it's possible. Rent, utilities, food. My entire salary goes toward that." Richard nodded understandingly. "You know, if you ever need a side job, I always have work for a smart girl in my office." "That's very kind of you," Samantha said, touching his hand on the table. It was a light touch that could have been dismissed as accidental, but it made Richard blush slightly. 2 tables away sat David Morris, owner of Morris & Sons Construction. A 52-year-old man with calloused hands and a piercing gaze, he hadn't spoken to Samantha in 6 months. Their relationship had ended in a scandal when he discovered that she had borrowed his credit card without permission. David caught Samantha's eye and shook his head in clear disapproval as he watched her conversation with Richard. Samantha just shrugged and turned away. The past was the past, and the future required new investments. After work, Samantha met up with Jesse Park at the stylish Scissors hair salon. Jesse was the only person in Casper who knew the truth about Samantha's lifestyle. A 32-year-old hairdresser with red hair and freckles, she had moved to town the same year as Samantha, and they had quickly become friends. "So, new fish on the hook?" Jesse asked, trimming the last client of the day. "Richard Coleman isn't a fish, he's a white shark," Samantha replied, settling down on the sofa in the corner of the salon. "The car dealership brings him at least $300,000 a year, plus he recently sold half his shares in some investment company in Cheyenne." "How do you know that?" "People talk when they think you're not listening, and waitresses are practically invisible to them." Jesse finished the haircut and showed the customer to the door. When they were alone, she sat down next to Samantha. "Sam, I'm worried about you. The David thing ended badly, and before that there was Michael Hunter, who almost sued you for fraud." "But he didn't," Samantha objected, "because he knew his wife would find out about our relationship." "What will happen when there are no more rich divorced men in Casper? There aren't that many of them here." Samantha laughed. "Jesse, men get divorced every day, and those who don't sometimes look for fun on the side. The main thing is to present yourself right." Just then, Samantha's phone rang. Richard's name lit up on the screen. "Hi," she answered in a honeyed voice. "Samantha, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I've been thinking about our conversation at the restaurant. Would you like to have dinner tomorrow? I know a great place in the next town." "That sounds wonderful. What time?" "I'll pick you up at 7. By the way, dress nicely. It's an expensive place." When Samantha hung up, Jesse shook her head. "Already asking her out to expensive restaurants? You work fast. Time is money, Jesse. I can't afford to waste time." The next evening, Richard arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. Samantha chose a black dress that accentuated her figure but looked modest. It was important to create the image of a girl who could be trusted. The restaurant was in Cheyenne, an hour's drive from Casper. It was an expensive place with dim lighting and waiters in tailcoats. Richard clearly wanted to impress. "Tell me about yourself," he asked when they had ordered. "What brought you to Casper?" Samantha told him the story she had prepared in advance. She came from a middle-class family. Her father had lost his job when she was 23, and she had had to drop out of college and look for work. Casper seemed like a good place to start over. "And your family? Parents, brothers, sisters?" "My parents live in Colorado. My father finally found a job, but they're still paying off debts. I'm an only child, so I try to help them out when I can." It was a lie. Samantha's parents had died in a car accident when she was 18, leaving only debts behind. But the pitiful story about her family's hardships always worked. "You're a good daughter," Richard said, and he sounded sincere. Not everyone is willing to sacrifice their plans for their family. Dinner went well. Richard talked about his business, his daughter who was attending college in California, and his divorce, which had been difficult for him. Samantha listened attentively, asked the right questions, and expressed sympathy at the right moments. "You know," he said as they drove back to Casper, "I haven't met such an understanding girl in a long time. Most women my age are only interested in money." Samantha barely managed to suppress an ironic smile. "Money doesn't make you happy, Richard. It's more important to find someone to share your life with." A week later, they were seeing each other every day. Richard took her to the theater, bought her gifts, and paid her restaurant bills. Samantha played the role of a modest girl who was embarrassed by such attention but couldn't resist his charm. "You're spending too much on me," she said when he gave her gold earrings. "I'm not used to gifts like this." "You deserve the best," Richard replied. "Let me take care of you." A month later, Samantha was practically living in Richard's house. It was a large mansion on the outskirts of town with a view of the mountains, a swimming pool, and a 3-car garage. She had her own bedroom, although she spent most of her time in his room. Richard paid for her online business administration courses and got her a job at a car dealership. Officially, she was his assistant, but in reality, she was just enjoying life. "I never thought I'd be able to trust a woman again after my divorce," he confessed to her one evening. "But with you, I feel young." Samantha kissed him and whispered the words of love he wanted to hear so badly. And she counted how much time she needed to gain access to his bank accounts. 3 months had passed since that first dinner in Cheyenne. Samantha had finally moved into Richard's house, leaving her modest apartment on the north side of town. The mansion on Mountain View Drive was her new home, and she quickly settled into her role as hostess. "Honey, don't forget we're having dinner with Tom Anderson and his wife tonight," Richard said, tying his tie in front of the mirror in the bedroom. Tom owned the largest ranch in the county and was one of the most influential men in Casper. "Of course, dear. I made your favorite dish, steak with country-style potatoes," Samantha replied, adjusting the collar of his shirt. Over the past few months, she had learned all his food preferences, habits, and weaknesses. Richard smiled and kissed her on the forehead. "I don't know what I would do without you. The house finally feels like home." After the divorce, the house was indeed empty. Richard's ex-wife, Linda, had taken most of the furniture and decorative items. Samantha gradually filled the space with new things, always tasteful, always expensive, always under the pretext of making Richard feel at home. "Richard, remember you mentioned plans to expand the car dealership?" Samantha asked over breakfast. "How's that project coming along?" "It's still in the planning stages. I need to find a suitable piece of land and negotiate a loan with the bank. Although, to be honest, I'm thinking about selling the business." Samantha looked up from her coffee. This was unexpected. "Selling it? But why? Business is going well." "It is, but I'm 45, Sam. I want to do something else while I still have the energy. Maybe move somewhere warmer and start a small business by the sea." "What do potential buyers say?" "There's one serious prospect. A group of investors from Denver is willing to pay $2.5 million. It's a good price." Samantha nodded, trying not to show her excitement. $2.5 million was a sum that could change her whole life. "And when might that happen?" "They want to close the deal by the end of the year, but I haven't made a final decision yet." That same day, Samantha met Jessie at the beauty salon. Her friend noticed her excited state right away. "What's going on? You're glowing like a Christmas tree." "Richard is going to sell the car dealership for $2.5 million, Jessie whistled. "That's serious money. What are you planning to do with it?" "I don't know yet, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "Sam, be careful. The higher the stakes, the more dangerous the game." But Samantha wasn't listening anymore. Plans were forming in her head. $2.5 million could provide her with a comfortable life for many years to come. The main thing was to calculate everything correctly. That evening, the Anderson family had dinner. Tom Anderson turned out to be a heavy-set man in his 60s with piercing eyes, and his wife Mary was an elegant woman who was clearly accustomed to judging people at first glance. "So, Samantha, Richard told me that you work in his office," Mary said when they moved on to dessert. "Yes, I help with paperwork and meet clients. It's very interesting work." "And before that, you worked as a waitress at the Golden Horseshoe, right?" Samantha sensed a trap in the question. "Yes, for a few years. It was a temporary job while I was deciding what I wanted to do next." "I see." Mary exchanged a meaningful glance with her husband. "Where is your family from?" "Colorado. My parents live in Denver." After dinner, when the guests had left, Richard was unusually quiet. "Is something wrong?" Samantha asked. "Tom warned me that there are rumors about us in town." "What kind of rumors?" "People think you're with me for my money. Tom even mentioned your previous relationships with David Morris and Michael Hunter." Samantha felt her heart beat faster, but she remained calm on the outside. "Richard, I understand that people like to gossip. Yes, I had relationships with those men, but that was before you. And the fact that they happen to be wealthy is just a coincidence." Coincidence? In a town like Casper, the circle of successful bachelors is limited. If a woman wants to find a serious relationship, she inevitably meets men who can provide for a family. Richard thought about it. "Maybe you're right. It's just that after my divorce, I became more cautious." "I understand that. But haven't my actions over the past few months shown you my true feelings?" He hugged her. "They have. I'm sorry I doubted you." The next day, Samantha decided to strike first. She knew that David Morris was the source of the gossip, and it was time to deal with it. The construction company Morris & Sons was located in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. Samantha parked Richard's car near the office and went inside. David was sitting at a massive wooden desk, studying blueprints. When he saw her, he leaned back in his chair. "Samantha Reed, what can I do for you?" "Hi, David. I need to talk to you." "About what? About how you cleaned out my Tiffany account buying jewelry for yourself? Or about how you disappeared when I found out?" "About how you're spreading rumors about me all over town." David laughed. "Gossip? I tell people the truth. You're a professional gold digger, Sam, and Richard Coleman is your next victim." "Richard isn't a victim. I love him." "Like you loved me? Like you loved Michael Hunter? You have a peculiar understanding of love." Samantha took a step closer to the table. "David, I'm asking you to stop. Richard is a good man, and he doesn't deserve to be turned against me. And I didn't deserve to be robbed, but that didn't stop you. I paid back all the money. After you were caught. Samantha, you haven't changed, and you won't change. It's in your nature." The conversation came to a standstill. Samantha realized that she couldn't convince David. All she could do was hope that Richard wouldn't believe the gossip. But after a few days, it became clear that the rumors had taken effect. Richard became more withdrawn, started asking strange questions about her past, and checking his bank accounts. "Richard, what's going on?" Samantha asked one evening when he checked his phone balance for the third time that day. "Nothing special, just keeping an eye on the finances." "Don't you trust me?" "I trust you, but trust doesn't mean recklessness." At the same time, Samantha learned that the deal to sell the car dealership was moving faster than expected. The buyers had agreed to all of Richard's terms and were prepared to pay cash within a month. Can you imagine, Sam? $2.5 million in cash. The buyers want to avoid bank procedures, so they're willing to pay extra for the option of paying in cash. Where are you going to keep that kind of money? In a bank safe deposit box. But first, The money will sit in my home safe for a few days while I decide how best to invest it." Samantha nodded, trying to look uninterested. But inside, she was boiling. $2.5 million in cash in a home safe. It was an opportunity that couldn't be missed. That same evening, she met Jesse at the rodeo bar on the outskirts of town. It wasn't the most suitable place for confidential conversations, but that was precisely why none of their acquaintances ever went there. "You look like you're planning the heist of the century," Jesse remarked when Samantha told her about the money. "Maybe I am. Sam, tell me you're joking." "Jesse, it's $2.5 million. With that money, I can get out of Casper and start a new life anywhere." "What about Richard? You said you loved him." Samantha downed her whiskey in one gulp. "Richard is a good man, but he's starting to distrust me. Our relationship won't last much longer anyway." "You want to steal his money?" "I want to secure my future. Richard is rich. He'll survive the loss. And for me, this is my only chance to escape this trap." "What trap?" "The trap of eternal dependence on men. Jesse, I'm almost 30. How much longer can I play the role of a young and naive girl? Sooner or later, my age will catch up with me. And then what? Will I be left with nothing?" Jesse was silent for a long time. "What if you get caught?" "They won't catch me. I have a plan." "What plan?" "Richard will get the money on Friday. On Saturday, he has a meeting with an investment advisor in Cheyenne. He wants to discuss investment options. He'll be gone all day. I have the code to the safe. I've seen him open it." "Sam, this is crazy. Even if you take the money, how will you explain your disappearance?" "I won't disappear right away. I'll act normal for a few days, then say I'm going to visit my sick aunt in California. By the time he notices it's missing, I'll be long gone." "What if he goes to the police right away?" "He can't prove that I stole the money. There are all kinds of people in the house. The cleaning lady, the gardener, repairmen, and the deal itself wasn't exactly above board. Who knows what kind of people those buyers are?" Jessie shook her head. "You're playing with fire, Sam." "I'm playing for survival, Jesse, and this is my last game." Friday, November 15th. The day Samantha had been waiting for 2 weeks. Richard received the money from the sale of the car dealership. $2.5 million in $100 bills, neatly packed in a black briefcase. "I can't believe this really happened," Richard said, placing the briefcase on the kitchen table. 20 years of work turned into this bag of money. Samantha hugged him from behind. "You should be proud of yourself. Not many people can build such a successful business from scratch. You know what's strange? I feel relieved, like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders." "What now? What are your plans?" Richard turned to her. "I want to do nothing for a while. Rest, think about the future. Maybe we could go somewhere? Europe, for example." "That sounds wonderful," Samantha replied, although something cold tightened in her chest. She had no plans to travel to Europe with him. Richard opened the briefcase, and Samantha saw neatly stacked wads of $100 bills. She had never seen so much money in one place. "I'll take all this to the bank tomorrow," Richard said. "But first, we need to meet with James Wilson in Cheyenne. He's an investment advisor who will help us manage the money properly." "What time is the meeting?" 10 in the morning. I'll probably be back in the evening. James wants to show me some investment properties in town." Samantha nodded, trying not to show her excitement. Everything was going exactly as she had planned. Richard locked the briefcase in the safe behind the mountain landscape painting in his office. She knew the code by heart. 1975, his birth year, followed by 0824, his daughter's birthday. It was a simple combination that he had never changed. That evening, they had dinner at the Rocky Mountains restaurant in the city center. Richard was in high spirits, making plans for the future, talking about trips and new opportunities. Samantha listened and smiled, but her thoughts were far away. "Sam, you seem distracted today," he remarked. "Is everything okay?" "Just tired. Been a lot of work at the office lately." "You know what? Tomorrow, when I get back from Cheyenne, we'll have a romantic evening. Just you and me, no chores, no talk about money." "Sounds wonderful," Samantha replied, and there was no insincerity in her voice. At one point, she had truly loved this man. But love and survival were two different things. On the way home, Richard stopped at a gas station. While he was filling up the car, Samantha checked her phone for messages. Jesse had written, "You can still change everything. Think carefully." Samantha quickly typed a reply. "Tomorrow at 11 a.m., meet me at the usual place an hour after." At home, Richard checked the safe again to make sure the money was still there, and they went to bed. Samantha lay awake for a long time, listening to Richard's steady breathing beside her. Several times she was ready to give up her plan, but then she remembered the conversations in town, how Mary Anderson had looked at her, Tom's warnings. Sooner or later, Richard would believe the rumors, and then she would be left with nothing. In the morning, Richard got up early, as usual. He had breakfast, looked through his mail, and checked the safe again. "I'm going to Cheyenne," he said, kissing Samantha goodbye. "I'll be back by 7 in the evening." "Have a good meeting, dear." Samantha walked him to his car, waved goodbye, and returned to the house. Now all she had to do was wait. The plan was simple. At 11 o'clock, she would open the safe, take the money, and drive to Jesse's. She would leave most of the money there and return home to wait for Richard as if nothing had happened. At 10:30, the doorbell rang. Samantha looked out the window and saw an unfamiliar man in a dark suit. Her heart skipped a beat. What if it was the police? But the man looked too elegant to be a cop. She opened the door, leaving the chain on. "Good afternoon. My name is Michael Gray. I represent Denver Investments. We purchased the car dealership from Mr. Coleman. Richard isn't home. He's in Cheyenne." "I know. That's why I'm here. We've had some problems with the paperwork, and I need to take the money back for recalculation." Samantha felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. "What kind of problems?" "Technical. There was an error in the tax calculations in the contract. Nothing serious, but the law requires it to be corrected before the money can be transferred to the seller. I can't make decisions like that without Richard. Call him." "I tried. His phone is unavailable. He must be on the road." Michael Gray handed her the documents. "Here's the official notification. As you can see, it's been signed by our legal department." Samantha looked through the papers. They looked official, with stamps and signatures, but something made her uneasy. "Wait here. I'll try to get Richard on the phone." She closed the door and dialed Richard's number. No one answered. Then she called the investment advisor's office in Cheyenne. "James Wilson speaking." "James, this is Samantha, Richard Coleman's girlfriend. He was on his way to your office." "Samantha?" "But we rescheduled the meeting for Monday. Richard called last night and said he had something come up." Samantha's vision blurred. "Rescheduled for Monday?" "Yes. Did something happen?" She hung up. Richard wasn't going anywhere. He had lied to her, but why? Samantha went to the window. Michael Gray was standing next to an expensive black car, talking on the phone. Something about his manner seemed familiar to her. Suddenly she realized it was a trap. Richard was testing her. He suspected she might try to steal the money and decided to provoke her. Her heart was racing. If she opened the door and said she couldn't give the money without Richard, it would look normal. But if she tried to open the safe to check if the money was there, she would be caught red-handed. Samantha returned to the door. "I'm sorry, but I can't give you the money without Richard's written permission. Come back when he's home." "Miss, I understand your concern, but time is of the essence. If we don't get the documents corrected today, the deal could fall through and Mr. Coleman will lose a significant amount of money in penalties." "Then wait for him to return." Michael Gray stood there for a few more minutes, wrote something down in his notebook, and left. Samantha sat down on the sofa, trying to make sense of what had happened. Richard was clearly suspicious of something. Maybe someone had warned him. David Morris? Or had he figured it out himself? Either way, the plan had failed. Now all she could do was wait for Richard to return and hope he hadn't found out about her intentions. But she didn't have to wait long. At 11:30, Richard returned home. He entered quietly, as if he were sneaking in. "Richard? You're back early," Samantha said, coming to meet him. He looked at her intently. "The meeting was canceled. Did we have any visitors?" "Yes, a man came by. He said he was representing buyers for your car dealership. He wanted to pick up some money because of some problems with the paperwork." "And what did you tell him?" "That I couldn't make any decisions like that without you." Richard nodded. "Right, I didn't send anyone like that." He went into his study and opened the safe. The money was there. "Sam, we need to talk." The tone of his voice did not bode well. Samantha sat down in the chair opposite his desk. "How long have you been planning to steal this money?" The question hit her like a blow. Samantha tried to look surprised. "Richard, what are you talking about?" "Michael Gray is a private investigator. I hired him to check on you, and you know what? Last night, Jessie Park came to my office. She told me about your plans." Her world collapsed. Jessie had betrayed her. "She said she tried to talk you out of it, but you were adamant that you were going to take the money this morning while I was out." Samantha was silent. There was no point in denying it. "Why, Sam? Have I treated you badly? Haven't I given you everything you wanted?" "You have," she replied quietly. "But it's not your fault, Richard. It's my nature." "Your nature? I don't know any other way. I've spent my entire adult life surviving by using men. It's the only thing I know how to do." Richard stared at her for a long time. "Have you ever truly loved anyone?" "You," Samantha replied, and it was true. "But that's not enough. Love doesn't override the instinct for self-preservation." "The instinct for self-preservation? You have a home, a job, a man who would do anything for you. What are you preserving yourself from? From old age? From loneliness? From the moment I'm no longer attractive and have nowhere to go?" Richard stood up and walked over to the window. "You know what's the saddest thing? I really did think about proposing to you. After New Year's, I even bought a ring." Samantha felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Richard, but now I realize I would have been marrying an illusion. The role you were playing." He turned to her. "Pack your things, Sam. I want you out of here by evening. Where will I go?" "That's not my problem. You have a few hours to figure something out." Samantha nodded and went to her bedroom. There was nothing to pack. Richard had bought almost everything. She took only the bare essentials and her documents. As she descended the stairs with her bag, Richard was standing in the hall. "Sam, one last question. If that detective hadn't arrived, would you have really stolen the money?" Samantha stopped at the door. "Yes, I would have. Thanks for your honesty." She left the house and got into her old car. She started the engine and slowly drove down the familiar road. In the rearview mirror, the mansion on Mountain View Drive grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. Her first stop was Jessie's place. The beauty salon was closed, but her friend's car was in the parking lot. Samantha knocked on the back door. "Jessie, open up, it's me." The door opened. Jessie looked like she hadn't slept all night. "Sam, why did you do that?" "Because you would have ruined your life, and his too. It was my choice. The wrong choice. Sam, you would have become a criminal. And Richard is a good man. He didn't deserve to be betrayed like that." Samantha sat down on the sofa in the back room of the salon. "What now?" "He kicked me out. I have nowhere to go. You have somewhere to go. You can rent an apartment, find a decent job, start an honest life." "With what money? I have no savings and no references for a good job." Jessie took an envelope out of her purse. "Richard asked me to give this to you." Inside the envelope was money, $5,000, and a note, "For a new start. There won't be any more." Samantha crumpled the note. "Charity. Help, there's a big difference." "And you? Do you also think I got what I deserved?" Jessie sat down next to her. "I think you've fallen into a trap of your own fears. You're so afraid of being without money that you're willing to do anything. But you can't live like this, Sam. That's easy to say when you have a career and a steady income. Then get a career, finish your education, learn to earn an honest living." Samantha stood up. "Maybe you're right, maybe." She took the envelope with the money and headed for the exit. "Sam, where are you going?" "To find a place to live, and a job, and a new life. If you need anything." "Thanks, Jessie, for everything." Samantha stepped outside. It was getting dark. Uncertainty lay ahead, but for the first time in many years, it was honest uncertainty. A week had passed since Samantha moved out of Richard's house. She was renting a room at the roadside inn on the outskirts of Casper, a cheap place where no one asked any questions. The money Richard had given her was dwindling by the day. On Saturday evening, Samantha sat in her shabby room and counted her remaining money. $200. That would last a week at most. And then what? She took out her phone and dialed Richard's number. No answer. She tried again, Same thing. Then she wrote a message. "Richard, I need to talk to you. It's important." The reply came an hour later. "We have nothing to talk about, Samantha." She wrote again. "Please give me one last chance to explain." No. Samantha threw her phone on the bed. Everything she had built over the years had collapsed in a single week. And all because of that damn money lying in the safe, waiting for its moment. Suddenly, a plan formed in her head. Desperate, crazy, but the only option she had. She knew that on Saturdays, Richard usually had dinner with his daughter, who was home from college for the weekend. They always went to the same restaurant, the Rocky Mountains in the city center. Dinner usually lasted 2 hours. Samantha looked at her watch. It was 8 o'clock. If they had left at 7, as usual, she had an hour to break into the house, take the money, and disappear. Richard always hid a spare key under a rock near the back entrance. She knew that. She changed into dark clothes, grabbed a flashlight, and drove to the house on Mountain View Drive. The mansion stood in darkness, only the automatic lights illuminating the path to the entrance. Richard's car wasn't there, which meant he was really gone. Samantha parked 2 blocks away and walked to the back of the house. She found the rock with the key under it and quietly opened the door. It was quiet and dark inside. Samantha turned on her flashlight and walked to Richard's study. Her heart was pounding, her hands were shaking. She had never been a thief in the literal sense of the word. She had always acted through seduction and manipulation. But now she had no choice. The call came into the Casper police station at 10:43 p.m. A woman's voice, trembling with fear, reported a gunshot at 1247 Mountain View Drive. Mrs. Evans, a neighbor, heard a loud bang around 8:30 p.m., but at first thought it was fireworks. Only when she saw flashing lights through her neighbor's window did she decide to call the police. Patrol Officer Jim Rodriguez was the first to arrive at the scene. What he saw on the back porch of the mansion prompted him to immediately call for backup and an investigative team. The body of a young woman was lying on stone slabs in a pool of blood. An open black briefcase lay nearby, spilling out wads of $100 bills. A few meters from the body lay a pistol. Inside the house, Rodriguez found the owner, Richard Coleman, sitting in the living room, staring blankly into space. He answered the police officer's questions in monosyllables, clearly in a state of shock. Detective Mike Thornton arrived 15 minutes later. The 48-year-old investigator with 20 years of experience immediately took control of the situation. "Cordon off the perimeter. Don't let anyone in without my permission," he ordered the arriving officers. "Call forensics and crime scene investigators." An initial examination of the scene revealed the following. The back door of the house was open, the lock undamaged. Footprints on the flower bed near the house indicated that someone had entered the property from the side. A 9mm Glock pistol lay next to the body, with 1 bullet fired. The victim was a woman in her 30s, with dark hair and of medium build. She was wearing a black jacket and jeans. No documents were found on her. "Detective," Officer Rodriguez addressed Thornton. "The homeowner says he knows this woman, Samantha Reed, his ex-girlfriend." Thornton nodded and headed into the house for an initial interview. Richard Coleman sat in the living room holding a glass of water. The man looked shaken, his hands trembling. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Detective Thornton. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened." "I know this woman," Richard said without looking up. "Samantha Reed. We were seeing each other." "When was the last time you saw her?" "A week ago. She moved out of my place." "Under what circumstances?" Richard paused. "We had some differences. I asked her to move out." "Mr. Coleman, is the gun registered to you?" "Yes, I have a license." "Where were you tonight between 8 and 9 o'clock?" "At home, reading in my study." "Did you hear anyone enter the house?" "I heard a noise on the terrace. I went out to look and saw her. She was already dead." Thornton took down the statement, but something about Coleman's behavior was suspicious. The man was clearly hiding something. "Mr. Coleman, I must ask you not to leave town until the investigation is complete. I will need a more detailed statement tomorrow." By midnight, the entire investigation team had arrived at the scene. Forensic experts began a detailed examination of the crime scene, photographing every inch of the terrace and the surrounding area. Medical examiner Dr. Sarah Mitchell conducted a preliminary examination of the body. One gunshot wound to the heart, she reported to Thornton. The shot was fired from close range, approximately 3 to 4 meters. Death was almost instantaneous. Time of death? Preliminary estimate is between 8:30 and 9 p.m. I'll have a more accurate time after the autopsy. Thornton examined the contents of the briefcase. The money was real, bundles of $100 bills totaling approximately $2.5 million. That's a lot of money to keep at home, Sergeant Davis remarked. Too much, the detective agreed. We need to find out where it came from. Samantha's purse with her documents was found in her car, which was parked 2 blocks from her home. The address was the Roadside Inn, room 15. On Sunday morning, Thornton began interviewing the victim's acquaintances. The first was Jessie Park, who was identified as Samantha's closest friend. The woman met the detective at a beauty salon and looked shaken. "I can't believe Sam is dead," she repeated. "This is a nightmare." "When was the last time you saw Samantha Reed?" "On Friday, a week ago. She came to my place after Richard kicked her out of the house." "Why did he kick her out?" Jessie hesitated. "They had a fight over money." "What money?" "Richard recently sold his car dealership. He got a lot of money. Samantha sometimes said strange things about that money." "Like what?" "That with that kind of money, you could start a new life anywhere." Thornton wrote down her statement. "Miss Park, did you know that Samantha was planning to do something with the money?" Jessie was silent for a long time, then nodded. "She said she deserved a share, that she had spent the best years of her life on Richard." "Did she threaten him?" "No, she didn't. She was just desperate. She said she had no other way out." Next was David Morris. The construction company owner welcomed the detective into his office, looking grim but composed. "Samantha Reed was a complicated woman," he said. "We had a relationship 2 years ago. It ended badly." "Why?" "She used my credit card without permission. She spent several $1,000s on jewelry and clothes." "Did you report it to the police?" "No. She paid the money back when I threatened to take her to court." "What can you tell me about her relationship with Richard Coleman?" Morris smirked. "The same as all her relationships. Samantha was looking for rich men and living off them. Richard wasn't the first or the last." "Did you warn him about her intentions?" "I tried. But men in love rarely listen to reason." "Mr. Morris, where were you last night between 8 and 9? "At home with my wife. We were watching a movie. She can confirm that." At the Roadside Inn, Thornton examined Samantha's room. The modest dwelling contained very few belongings, a few sets of clothes, cosmetics, and documents. In the nightstand, he found notes with the addresses and phone numbers of various men, including Richard Coleman. The motel manager, an elderly man named Frank, said that Samantha lived quietly and never caused any trouble. "She paid for her room every week in cash," he said. "I last saw her yesterday morning. She looked upset." "Did she have a boyfriend? Did she have visitors?" "Not that I noticed. She kept to herself." By Sunday evening, Thornton was beginning to piece together what had happened. Samantha Reed, a woman of questionable reputation, had access to Richard Coleman's home, where a large sum of money was kept. The circumstances of her death suggested that she had broken into the house with the intent to steal. But many questions remained unanswered. How exactly did the shooting happen? Who pulled the trigger and under what circumstances? And why was Richard Coleman so nervous during the interrogation? On Monday morning, the detective planned to have a more detailed conversation with the homeowner. His intuition told him that the man had not told the whole truth about the events of Saturday night. Meanwhile, news of the murder spread through Casper like wildfire. Such events were rare in a small town, and everyone was talking about one thing: the death of Samantha Reed and the arrest of Richard Coleman. By Monday evening, after additional questioning and analysis of the evidence, Detective Thornton realized that Richard Coleman knew much more about what had happened than he was letting on. And perhaps he was not just a witness, but a direct participant in the tragedy. Monday, November 25th. Detective Thornton arrived at the police station at 7 in the morning, an hour before the start of the official workday. The Samantha Reed murder case had kept him awake all night. There were too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. The preliminary report from the forensic team lay on the table. The fingerprints on the gun belonged to Richard Coleman. Gunpowder residue on his hands confirmed that he had recently fired a firearm. The case seemed clear. But Thornton was confused by the details. First, the angle of the bullet's entry indicated that the shooter was significantly higher than the victim, either standing on a raised platform or the victim was on the ground at the time of the shot. Second, there were no signs of a struggle, even though the door had been opened from the inside and not broken down. At 9 in the morning, the detective met with Richard Coleman again. This time, the conversation took place in the formal setting of an interrogation room. Mr. Coleman, I want you to tell me again about the events of Saturday evening, in detail. Richard looked tired, as if he hadn't slept all night. I already told you everything. Tell me again. Sometimes people remember important details. I was at home reading in my study. I heard a noise on the terrace, went out and saw Samantha. She was dead. And the gun? How did it end up next to the body? Richard hesitated. I don't know. Maybe it fell out of her hands. Mr. Coleman, Samantha Reed didn't have a gun license, and the only fingerprints on the gun are yours. There was a long silence. Richard stared at the table, avoiding the detective's gaze. Mr. Coleman, yesterday you said you were reading in your study, but your study is on the second floor, and you claim to have heard noises on the back patio. That's unlikely. Maybe I was mistaken. Perhaps I was downstairs. Where exactly? In the living room. Thornton made a note in his notebook. Mr. Coleman, I spoke with your neighbors. Mrs. Evans saw the light on in your study on the second floor last night, but the living room was dark. That contradicts your statement. Richard ran his hand over his face. Detective, I was in shock. I may have mixed up the details. Or you're hiding the truth. Mr. Coleman, the examination showed traces of gunpowder on your hands. You fired this gun. There was a long pause. Richard sat motionless, like a statue. I want a lawyer, he finally said. Thornton nodded. That's your right. While waiting for the lawyer, the detective decided to talk to Jesse Park again. Perhaps Samantha's friend knew more than she had told him yesterday. The beauty salon was empty. Jesse had canceled all her appointments for the day. The woman sat at the counter, drinking coffee with trembling hands. Miss Park, I need to ask you a few more questions. Of course, detective. You said Samantha talked about Richard's money. Did she have a specific plan to steal it? Jessie lowered her eyes. She was desperate. She said it was her only chance. Chance for what? To start a new life. Sam was afraid of growing old, afraid of being left with nothing. Did she know where Richard kept his money? She knew the code to the safe. She saw him open it. Thornton wrote down the information. Miss Park, why didn't you report this right away? Because I didn't want to make things worse for Sam. She's dead now. What difference does it make? It makes a difference because it helps us understand the motive for the crime. Jesse looked up at him. Detective, did Richard really kill her? The investigation is ongoing. I can't believe he's capable of murder. He's such a calm person. Calm people can also commit crimes in extreme situations. Back at the station, Thornton discovered that Richard had been joined by a lawyer, Thomas Harris, one of the best defense attorneys in the state. Detective Thornton, my client is ready to make a statement, but only in my presence. Of course. They gathered again in the interrogation room. Richard looked more composed after talking to his lawyer. Mr. Coleman, are you ready to tell the truth about what happened? Richard nodded. Yes, I did shoot Samantha. The lawyer put his hand on his client's shoulder. Richard, remember what we discussed? I remember, Tom. But enough lying. Richard looked at the detective. I knew she was coming for the money. Jesse Park warned me about her plans a week ago. Jesse told you about Samantha's intentions? Yes. She tried to talk her friend out of it, but realized it was useless. Then she came to me. Thornton glanced at the lawyer. Go on. I decided to set a trap. I pretended to leave for a meeting in Cheyenne, but stayed at home. I waited. And what happened when she arrived? Samantha broke in through the back door and took the briefcase from the safe. When she was leaving, I stopped her. What exactly did you say to her? I asked her to return the money. I explained that I wouldn't call the police if she left immediately. And how did she react? Richard paused. She refused. She said it was her only chance and she wouldn't back down. And then? I took out my gun to scare her. But she ran toward the door. I yelled at her to stop. And? She turned around and said, "Then shoot." And I shot her. The lawyer pressed his lips together. "Richard, this was self-defense. You were protecting your property." Thornton shook his head. "Mr. Harris, the law does not allow the use of deadly force to protect property unless there is a threat to life. Samantha Reed was committing burglary. My client had the right to defend himself. She was unarmed and trying to escape. That's not self-defense." Richard lowered his head. "The detective is right, Tom. I didn't kill her in self-defense. I killed her because I couldn't let her ruin her life completely." "What do you mean?" "If she had stolen the money, she would have been caught sooner or later. She didn't know how to be careful. And then she would have gone to prison for many years." The lawyer sighed. "Richard, please don't say anything else." But Richard continued, "I loved her, Detective, despite all her faults, all her lies, and I couldn't watch her turn into a common thief." "That's why you killed her?" "That's why I shot her. At that moment, it seemed like the only way to stop her from falling." Thornton closed his notebook. "Mr. Coleman, you are under arrest on charges of second-degree murder. Mr. Harris, your client will be held in custody until the trial." 3 months later, the trial of the state of Wyoming v. Richard Coleman began in the Casper District Court. The prosecution sought a conviction for first-degree murder, while the defense argued that it was manslaughter committed in the heat of passion. Jessie Park testified, explaining her motives. "I was trying to save my friend from making a mistake. I never thought it would lead to tragedy." David Morris confirmed Samantha's character as a woman prone to deception. She was dangerous to the men who trusted her. Detective Thornton presented the results of the investigation, emphasizing that the defendant acted deliberately by setting up an ambush. The defense tried to portray Richard as a victim of circumstances, a decent man who was driven to despair. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The verdict was unexpected for many, guilty of manslaughter. The judge sentenced Richard Coleman to 12 years in prison. "The defendant committed the crime under the influence of strong emotions," said the judge, "but that does not justify taking another person's life." A year later, Casper was living a normal life, but the story of Samantha Reed and Richard Coleman remained in the memory of the townspeople. The house on Mountain View Drive was sold to new owners, and Jessie Park moved to Denver, unable to bear the sidelong glances and whispers. David Morris sometimes told his acquaintances, "Samantha chose her own path. It's just a shame she dragged a good man down with her." In a Wyoming state prison, Richard Coleman worked in the library and studied law. He wrote a letter to Samantha's parents, whom he tracked down through a detective. The letter contained words of remorse and a plea for forgiveness. There was no reply. Every Saturday, he received letters from his daughter in California. She wrote about her studies, her plans for the future, and how she didn't believe her father was guilty. "You were defending your home, Dad. I understand." But Richard knew the truth. He didn't kill for money or to protect his home. He killed out of desperation, out of the impossibility of saving the woman he loved from her own self-destructive nature. In a small town where everyone knows each other, stories like this become legends. The legend of Samantha Reed, a beautiful woman who played with fire and got burned. The legend of Richard Coleman, a good man who made an irreparable mistake. And the legend that love and money are a dangerous combination that can destroy any life.